All right, guys. Hello, welcome everyone. Thursday evening, the 26th of March. Welcome. I'm glad that you all are here. This is part of a longer series of talks that we present on a monthly basis. And yet, today is our first time going around and doing it as a Zoom meeting. So I'm grateful and appreciative of each and every one of you who are coming to join us today to participate in the Zoom meeting. This is, again, the first go around of this. So if there are any glitches, please bear with us. We're going to do our best to get through those. But I think we've done a few dry runs to make sure that we've got this up and ready to go. I do, by the way, have some notes here to help with the presentation to make sure that I'm staying on track. So if you see my eyes darting periodically, please bear with me. I am reading notes and then getting back to you all. So just keep that in mind. It's not that I'm trying to ignore you at all. It's more a matter of me just trying to make sure that I'm on top of the content and staying on track there. So again, welcome everyone to these really challenging times and times of many unknowns. So I'm encouraged that you've come to join us this evening. And this is a Health Talk series put on by Flourish and Optimized Wellness Center. And so your hosts are me, Dr. Tim at Optimized Wellness Center, as well as my staff. Hope Esperanza is here as well, joining us. And my co-host is Anna Clint from Flourish. And so we've been able to put these on for a little over a year now, and I'm grateful that you're here to join us today. We want to ask a favor of everyone. If you would take just a moment in the background and go online, and we request that you provide some engagement to us while we're going through this talk. But also, if this is in fact valuable content and material for you, please go on to your favored social media outlet, whether that's Google or Facebook or Yelp, whatever that might be, and write a quick review. You can find us, Optimized Wellness Center, on any one of those channels. And just comment, because we want to share this with other individuals so that they also can engage and get to their best selves and participate in this. So we request that you do take a moment and do that. So Optimized Wellness Center, who are we? Well, we are your premier health and wellness center of the Bay Area. And yet, with these unpredictable times, we have taken the vast majority of our business and we've gone online, and we are providing telemedicine services to individuals far and wide and near and close. In addition, we are still providing acute care and emergency care for individuals that need it in office, but potentially there are individuals that want telemedicine in addition. Optimized Wellness Center is a multidisciplinary clinic where we offer functional medicine services, where we help the sick get well and the healthy excel. So if anyone that you know or yourselves are interested in functional medicine, please make sure to come and connect with us so that we can assist you. We have practitioners that are chiropractors, functional medicine practitioners, nutritional health coaching, acupuncture, as well as massage. And we specialize in optimizing human function. What I mean by this is we're maximizing your brain function, which we're going to talk about tonight, detoxification, mitigating aches and pains, addressing complex health conditions and autoimmune diseases, aligning human performance with coordination, achieving healthy and sustainable weight, enhancing nutritional absorption, and aging gracefully. I know that's a lot, but at any rate, today we are going to be talking about brain health in particular. So who am I? I'm Dr. Tim Heath, and what is my story? Well, my first experience with chiropractic was when I was 10 years old, and I unfortunately fell down a couple of flights of concrete steel-plated stairs, and there was not a lot of bounce, and I ended up going to have my first interaction with a chiropractor at that time. Fast forward a couple of decades, and I was in my 30s, and I was involved in a really tragic hit and run. And literally, life hit me, and I was forced to refocus and determine what I wanted to do. And I wanted to learn as much as I could about health and figure out how I can share that with you and others. It was hard. it was really hard. I hadn't had a science class or background since I was in grade school when we were poking frogs' eyeballs. And I'm now in my late 30s, and I already had multiple undergraduate and graduate degrees, but I'm going back to medical school, and it was tough. I'm trained now, and I'm a board certified primary care doctor with advanced specialty training in natural therapeutics. Specifically, I'm trained and licensed as a doctor of chiropractic. I went and trained with the best of the best in functional medicine and functional neurology, as well as in extremities. Many additional functional medicine courses to understand the science as well as the pathology, so that I could better learn how to share that information with you.
Share that information with you. And better share the information with you.
Oh, I can hear some other people in the background. It sounds like there's some folks that maybe you can mute yourselves if by chance you happen to be listening in, and just mute yourselves if you haven't been muted already. Thank you, I appreciate that. So this lends itself for me being able to share our expertise, what is true health, and to help you to be able to obtain it. And our mission is to collaborate with others to discover and uncover the best version of themselves by sharing our collaborative insights on how to achieve true and optimal health. To this end, my hope is to be able to empower you and to set you and compel you to be on and embark on your own journey towards true health. Our goal is to provide education and care that is grounded in science and research, along with actionable life-changing steps that can take you on this journey and help you to live the best life full of energy and vitality. So enough about me. What about you? What I'd like for each of you to do is to go into the chat box and just introduce yourselves and tell us where you're from. I'd like to just get some understanding of where people are joining us from in this talk today. All right. So while you're doing that, I'm in the background going to start talking about brain health and how to biohack your brain, okay? As many of you have expressed your curiosity about biohacking and the nutrition for your brain, I want for you also to take a moment in that chat box and to write in there if any of these are relevant to you or are of interest to you. Because we've gotten a lot of information and requests for people to talk about these things. So do you happen to have brain fog, memory lapses? Are there senior moments where maybe you just have kind of lost touch with where we are in that moment? You know, you enter into a room and you just can't even remember why you're there. Disorientation, type 2 or even type 3 diabetes, fear of developing dementia, and then the grand old CRS, can't remember shit. Well, so we're going to go through a number of those tonight. Do you ever feel like your brain is sluggish and wondering what you can do about it? What does my brain, or why does my brain start to crash around 3 p.m. in the afternoon? And what exactly is type 3 diabetes? And do I need to be worried about it even? And does my brain need specialized foods? Well, we're going to go through those things today. So again, if any of those things ring a bell, just type into that chat box. We want to get some engagement going here. So there are answers and we do have solutions. And so I want to make sure that you know that you are in the right place. You don't have to live your life shrouded each time leaving your doctor's office, wondering what's going on and leaving with more questions than you came in with. If you are not testing, then you're guessing. And so this is really a true tenet of functional medicine. There are some highly sensitive lab testing, we're going to talk about that later this evening, which identify the root cause and specifically to you about what is going on. And combined with a health history, this can lead us to what specifically we need to do to help you to address your health challenges. It's never just one thing. All roads lead to Rome. And this is why a multidisciplinary and multimodal approach gets a much better result, and which means that you can start feeling better faster. So rest assured, you are not alone and you are in the right place, and we do have some answers. And we're going to talk about these things today. Later on, I'm going to be talking about a special offer that I do have for you as well. And so we will give you some insights into as much as we can with the limited time that we have this evening together. And then if there are some things that you really want to hear about and are interested in, we'll have some time to go into some question and answer as well. But we can then also, if we don't get to anything, I want to encourage you to continue to write those questions in and or taking them to our Facebook page if we don't get to anything, and then we can help to address those there. But we're going to get through as many as we possibly can this evening. But we're also going to give you some actionable steps that you can take going forward to start feeling more alive and eliminating the health challenges without the need for more medication. We have to match the methods with the markers and the solutions with the situation. So this all starts with us getting to know you a little bit better, and so that we can provide personalized solutions towards your needs. Okay, so what is functional medicine? Some folks I know are already probably familiar with this, but some individuals that are have participated with us in the past are really not clear what that means. So I'm going to take just a moment to help to give some explanation of functional medicine. According to the Functional Medicine Institute, functional medicine addresses the underlying cause of disease using a systems-oriented approach and engaging both patient and practitioner in a therapeutic partnership. Functional medicine practitioners spend time with their patients, listening to their histories, as well as looking at the interactions of the genetic, environmental, and lifestyle factors that can influence the long-term history of their health, as well as complex and chronic diseases. The hallmarks of functional medicine involve understanding the origins, prevention, and treatment of chronic diseases by complex web of interactions with their patient history, physiology, and their lifestyle that can lead to illness. And I must assess you from head to toe if you really want true wellness. These hallmarks include a patient-centered care, health promotion beyond just the absence of disease, individual, not protocol-driven treatment plans, and integrative, science-based approaches towards healthcare, and attention in the internal, meaning the body, mind, and spirit factors, as well as the external, where we're talking about the physical and social environmental factors, and integrating these with the best medical practices. So that's a lot. So we're going to try and provide that perspective in our talk this evening, okay? All right, so let's dive in and let's talk about what does this all have to do with a healthy brain function. So what's the standard American diet, or the SAD diet, got to do with this? If you allow it to go unabated and without doing anything differently, what's this all going to mean, and what's coming down the pike for us? Many are told that you just have to get used to it. You're getting old and there's nothing that we can do, or it's not really that bad, or could be worse. Of course, with a healthy brain, there has to be 100% free will. And a person without a healthy brain is more, means that they really need to get more brain-driven behaviors. So what does all this mean? We're going to go through all of those things and some other things this evening. But what I want to start with talking about here is you have, as I mentioned earlier, you have to match the intervention with the issues. And so, for example, there are a variety of issues that could be going on and affecting one's brain. So let's briefly for a moment talk about a few of these issues and some of these things that could be affecting your brain. Notably, inflammation. And many of us are already familiar that inflammation is a common thread amongst many of the things that may be deleterious towards our health. And so this inflammation could be a genetic influence, it could be infections, it could be poor nutrition, or there could be trauma, and that trauma could lead to things called cytokines that breach what's called as the blood-brain barrier. This is like a supposedly an impervious barrier around our brain, but in fact these cytokines can cross that, and they can trick what's called as the microglia cells into creating more inflammation and attacking neurons in our brain. And this is going to result in a loss of cerebellar cell volume. So we end up with like a shrinking of the tissue, which then subsequently results in a loss in cellular connections and thus function. So the connections have to go from all these different areas in the brain for us to be able to function properly. But if we have these cytokines crossing that, we can get a shrinkage, and then we lose functional capacity. So what are the specialized cleaners of the brain called? Well, they're called glial cells, and in particular, they're microglial cells, and they're part of the lymphatic system. And their role is to clean up. But there are situations where, for example, if we have repetitive traumas, and those microglia cells can genetically ramify and become permanently on. And this is like the situations where we see athletes who have multiple brain injuries, and this results in chronic traumatic encephalopathies. And this mechanism results in this process that I mentioned just a moment ago. Another situation is where we have cerebral spinal fluid, CSF. And this is meant to bathe and nourish as well as protect the brain. Small alterations to the flow or the composition of that can impact the brain's function. And MRIs have shown that chiropractic care gets great results in terms of creating decompression, in particular of the brainstem, so that we can have proper flow of that CSF. And that fluid not only occurs around the brain, but through the entire spinal cord. And so any alterations to that can cause changes to brain function and the ability of the brain to be nourished and protected. So when there's inflammation, again, there are certain things that can happen, as I mentioned, about stopping the CSF flow, the cerebral spinal fluid, but then lymphatics start to back up and it stops flowing properly. And then the barrier, that blood-brain barrier system, breaks down. And in fact, there's actually a handful of different barriers in the body that we can talk about, and they all have some differences and some similarities as well. And so we're talking about blood-brain barrier, but we also have a gut barrier. We also have a lung barrier, which is kind of timely for us to be talking about that, especially when we're talking about coronavirus, which ultimately ends up being a respiratory disease and issue that people are dealing with. So interestingly enough, your olfactory system also has a barrier. And so all of these barrier systems can potentially break down. And if your gut becomes inflamed, well, then your brain becomes inflamed, and then your cerebral spinal fluid could stop pumping properly. And there's inflammation essentially occurring everywhere. And then your lymphatics become stagnant. And your lymphatics are really like the waste management. This is the trash collectors that should be picking up stuff and moving it out of the way. And so if it becomes stagnant, then gunk essentially starts to build up all over the place. And so we need that to be flowing and processing properly throughout. So one of the ways that we can deal with this is something called autophagy. And this is a process where we can get rid of some of that gunk. And fasting is known to be one of the most effective mechanisms to be able to facilitate this autophagy and getting rid of that gunk. But it's not just any old fasting. It's got to, you have to be really the right candidate for that, but also your body has to be prepared for that. So if you're under heightened amounts of stress, it may or may not be the best time to be able to do that. So it would probably be prudent that you're working with someone to help you to determine if in fact it's the right time and to be able to help you through that process. especially if you're already under duress. And so we're going to be, giving a talk about autophagy and fasting in the future. So if anyone's interested in that, write into that chat box autophagy or fasting, and we'll make sure to keep you informed about when we're going to be putting that on. So please write that in there if that's of interest to you. So next thing, stress. I mean, of course, everyone's probably already familiar with the fact that stress is so deleterious and can affect literally every system in the body. Well, stress alone can cause trauma in your brain. And we know that stress really creates, especially things like high cortisol levels, and it creates high probability that you're going to have a breakdown in what's called as the gap junctions in your gut. And these are the little slots that occur between the cells in your gut, and this inflammation ultimately results in what's called zonular occlusions, and these start to break down and create an inflammatory response, and eventually can work its way on up to the brain. And so we know that stress also has the ability to break down this blood-brain barrier, and then what's something called catecholamines, notably epinephrine and norepinephrine. They are created in your brain, but also in your adrenal system, and they potentially, in excess, they can destroy the brain and really start to break down the brain. So it starts to eat away at the foundation, notably in particular in this instance, of what's called as your hippocampus. And so the hippocampus, which is one of the biggest components associated with short-term memory. And so, when we talked about before, if people have CRS, or they have, senior moments, or they just can't quite remember why they entered into a room, well, often that's associated with that short-term memory in the hippocampus. And so this can also create a self-perpetuating situation where stress begets inflammation, and then that facilitates more stress, which then facilitates more inflammation. So this is a terrible situation where it's going to be self-perpetuating. So we need to really talk about ways to get a hold of that, and I'm going to be talking about that shortly. There's another situation here called neuroimmune excitotoxicity. Wow, that's a lot of syllables. Neuroimmune excitotoxicity. So neuroimmune excitotoxicity, this is when you move, typically when we move and you get exercise, you should be kicking a magnesium off, and then calcium comes into this cleft and it activates gene responses, and you can get then what's called as protein replications to occur, and everything really starts going super well. And this is great. And this is because you have proteins that start to make new receptors, and you've got to have those proteins for you to be able to make synaptic connectivity. And you've got these little proteins keeping the mitochondria generating ATP. So think of the mitochondria, these are the powerhouse to the cell. So it's kind of like, and they produce a unit of energy out of their little powerhouse stations. So think of like the outlet in your wall, it produces a unit of energy called kilowatts. Well, the ATP is the unit of energy coming out of the mitochondria that's producing energy for every cell in your body. Well, when you're inflamed, the problem is this overstimulates the cells, and then when these calcium, it gets, it does essentially everything in reverse. And so in this situation, we start having free radical damage, and it creates what's called a superoxide ions, anions, I apologize. And this activates an inducible nitric oxide, which then essentially like things start blowing up in your brain, and this neuroimmunoexcitotoxicity process starts to occur where cells start to go essentially crazy. And in this situation, exercise that should have been beneficial actually becomes counterproductive. And so people start feeling really terrible after even potentially relatively nominal amounts of exercise and activity. And so while typically we require activity in physical exercise, these individuals can go into, and ultimately, into a really terrible state where they might even have seizures. And our patients that we work with that have this kind of a situation where they're having a reverse of the value or the benefit associated with exercise, and they just feel completely exhausted, totally knackered after relatively small amounts of exercise. These folks, we work with them and we try and figure out where are their neurotransmitters and where are their micronutrients. And in particular, often we find that we need to create a better balance between calcium and magnesium. And we may use something called magnesium threonate, which is really helpful to be able to balance this. And it helps to lower the calcium levels, which when it's going awry, may end up triggering osteoporosis. I know it sounds weird, but again, it's creating kind of the reverse of everything. And so it rather starts, in this situation, the calcium, it starts to create, it goes into the vascularization and it creates a hardening, and it can even start to destroy the brain. And so we really need to rebalance that ratio of magnesium to calcium in a really therapeutic way. So another thing that can go on is infections. I know many people might not think of this associated with the brain, and it's often overlooked, but in fact, we can have what's called as PAMPs, P-A-M-P-S, PAMPs, and these are pathogens that cause DAMPs, D-A-M-P-S, and this is really the destruction that can occur. So typically we should have something called phagocytic cells, and they should gobble up the debris and necrotic or dead tissue in the brain. So cells have a programmed life, and they should at a certain time die, and then they should get gobbled up by these phagocytic cells, and the new cells should turn over, and we keep doing this process. So much like your cell phone has, a programmed cell death, well, this occurs also when cells in our body, they should die. Well, but if these cells become damaged, in this instance due to infections, this can cause a situation where the cleanup process doesn't really occur, and the body starts to tag these cells as foreign, and it can result in ultimately what's called as autoimmunity. So our body recognizes them as foreign, even though they're our own cells, and we start attacking essentially our own cells aberrantly. And so this is not great. And there are a variety of situations where this could potentially occur even without autoimmunity. We could also have issues with immunoglobulins, what's called as IgM, where we currently have an infection, or IgE, which is immunoglobulin E, where we're having an allergy, an allergic reaction, or IgG, and this is where we have trace or memory amounts of some substance in our body, and so we get kind of a heightened response to this. We can also have IgA and cross reactivity. Suffice to say, there are a variety of situations where things could go a little bit awry, and so somehow we have to manage infections and let the immune system do what it really needs to do, and it knows how to do, without completely neutralizing it and then giving us the right nutrients to repair it. So a terrible, really way downstream situation of these kinds of infections is meningococcal disease, and this is really hard to treat. And often people are utilizing really significant and hard drugs, but it's hard to get them across the blood-brain barrier. So anyway, there are some really further situations of this. So we have to dampen this inflammation and turn it off without addressing why it was there. Well, we have to do this really delicately in figuring this out in the first place. And so then you could end up with, if you haven't addressed why it's there in the first place, and you're just throwing another drug at it, you might end up with a runaway infection in this instance. And you really don't want that to happen. And it becomes sort of like a situation where you're tiptoeing through a very delicate field of flowers. And so you have to control for various things without destroying, while destroying some things, and you have to control for others. And it's really a delicate balance that you have to manage through here. So, of course, there's also potential for genetic dispensations, and then we need to manage brain nutrition as well. And so we found that there's one other example that I need to bring up here is there's a really high correlation with individuals who've had post-concussive syndrome. So this is where you've had a concussion, you've had some kind of trauma to the brain, and there's really an underlying unresolved autoimmune condition or an inflammatory issue going on, or an infection occurring, or an endocrine issue. So in other words, there's really a vast majority of individuals for whom these mild traumatic brain injuries that didn't heal in the normal 2 or 3 months, or even a mild traumatic brain injury, and then they went on to have these post-concussive syndromes where it's occurring for a longer and longer period of time, more than 3 months. And upwards of around 80 or 85 of these individuals start to have these other unresolved issues, as I was just mentioning a moment ago. So this is challenging. So if anyone, we're going to be talking about traumatic brain injuries in the upcoming months. In fact, we have a talk, I believe it's scheduled for June. So if anyone's interested in that, go to the chat box and type into the chat box June TBI, and we'll make sure to give you a link so that you can join us for that talk in June. So in the chat box, type in June TBI if you're interested in that, or anyone else who might be, so that we can help forward that information on. So, all right, let's see here. So most people, they should heal from these kinds of things. And yet, sometimes these things go on for a really long period of time, and the brain starts to atrophy. And we have these specialized receptors called NMDA receptors, and these specialized receptors lose their energy, and there starts to be a replication of broken genes in the instance of these traumatic brain injuries. And again, we're going to talk more about this in the upcoming month in June, but I'm giving you a little snippet of this right now. And this can alter what's called as our epigenetic response. So if there's something that occurs in our life now, and it starts to change our genetic expression that is going to manifest throughout the rest of our life, well, this is what's called as epigenetics. This is that which lies above the genetic code. So our genetic code is really that, it's like a blueprint. It says you can build the building, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily build the building. It just means you have a blueprint saying you can build that. You now have authorization to do that. Well, what happens is throughout our life, different things that occur in our lives can facilitate the turning on or facilitate the turning off of specific gene expressions. And so this is what is defined as epigenetics. So if anyone's interested in epigenetics, well, we're going to be talking about that as well. So go into the chat box and write about epigenetics, and we'll keep you in touch with that also. All right, so this can trigger the deletion or the duplication of components of your genetic genome, and this can switch on genetic diseases. Wow, that's tricky, and that's not great, and that could lead to things like Huntington's disease, or making you more prone to things like Alzheimer's disease, and it can damage parts of your brain that facilitate the expression and the release of dopamine. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, so many people have, this neurologic challenge now in their gut, in addition, which even heightens this further, reducing the release of dopamine. And this can result in Parkinson's disease. So next month, we're going to be talking about Parkinson's. So type in the box there, Parkinson's, if that's interesting to you too. Okay, wow, well, that was a lot. Holy cow. Okay, so I want to talk about 7 different pillars of brain health. So we're going to talk about 7 different pillars. And I'm going to quickly rattle them off, and then we're going to go into a little greater depth on each of these here, okay? So the 7 pillars are physical exercise. Number 1, you got to move. You got to excite your brain. Food and nutrition. You got to remove the inflammatory foods and eat brain-enhancing food and nutrition. Medical health. So this means like removing risk factors and reducing or eliminating medications that may be shrinking your brain volume specifically. Number 4, sleep and relaxation. So you got to use like breathing patterns and techniques, and stress really can shrink the brain, as we were just talking about a minute ago. So we need to figure out how to modulate and manage that. Number 5, mental fitness. So you got to keep learning, and your brain is a muscle. So what feeds your muscle is also going to feed your brains. Social interactions. Number 6. So you got to find your passion and express gratitude. And then environment, number 7 here. This has got to be one of the greatest influence on gene expression. And then there's a bonus one, which this is the neurology. And so proper neurologic connectivity, as well as specifically, and in particular, one thing that's really of interest to me is vagal tone, the vagus nerve and vagal tone. So exercise. Even if you've never exercised, in any physical activity is better than none. And so what's good for your heart is going to be good for your brain. It's going to help nitric oxide, which is going to dilate blood vessels and lead to better blood flow and supply. It enhances glutathione. We were just talking about that a moment ago. Glutathione, which is one of your major antioxidants in your body. And experts say that it's going to help to be a protective mechanism for your hippocampus. We were talking about that a moment ago as well. And it can last for as many as 3 days after just a single exercise routine. So for those next 3 days, you want to make sure to really go to the library and start learning things, because you're going to have greater enhanced capacity to be able to learn as well. So you got to use things like endurance activities as well as aerobic activities, some strength training. And strength training isn't only for bodybuilders. You can use resistance training and other kinds of things as well. Flexibility, you got to make sure that you're able to do those movement patterns, and as well as balance. So any of you that know me, we work a lot on balance, and brain balancing is super important. And this is not just can I stand up, but also balancing the different lobes of the brain and how we create connectivity in those, and so that we can adapt and not just react to our environment. That's super important. And so balance diminishes as we progressively get older, and so we need to really avoid falls and improve overall movement and connectivity into our brain, because actually like about 80% of the information that feeds up into the brain comes through what's called as mechanoreceptors. These are mechanically stimulated nerve endings, and that occurs through movement. And so it's super important to be able to do this. We teach our clients about brain balancing, and where there's a sophisticated set of techniques to really understand how the brain is functioning, but also if there's any deficiencies. And then we work on personalized and specific exercises, and many of which you can do at home to enhance your outcomes. So if you're not sure what to do, you can start and begin today, and you don't really need to leave your home or do anything. So during this pandemic, where many of us are isolated in our homes, you can do this from the comfort of your home. So my friend Tamar, actually, she offers online Zoom, just like we're doing right now, Zoom-based yoga and full body workouts twice a week. So I encourage you to go onto Zoom and check out her Facebook page. I'm going to put, let's see here, I'm going to take this and I'm going to put this into the chat box. Let me see if I can do this. So bear with me a moment here, guys. I'm going to expand this. I'm going to go into our chat box and let's see here. I'm going to put this in here. Check out this Facebook page. Her business is called Workout Spot, and you can go on there for free, you know, or make a nominal donation and do this. So I encourage each of you to do that. I don't get anything from this. I'm just helping to get you guys some opportunities for activity. All right, so number 2 was food and nutrition. So many of you have heard Hippocrates say, well, maybe you didn't hear him say it, but you've heard the phrase, let thy food be thy medicine. Well, this is super important, of course. And so I want to encourage each of you to be able to consider how you're going to do this. Every bite that we eat of the food is really, this is training your body to communicate and contribute to not only your physical body, but also your brain health. And it can either be salubrious or injurious. And so we need to really be conscious about the choices that we make and make sure that we're making really good choices with those foods. This is so important. And so a classic study on brain fitness was where they looked at nuns and reported in the book written by Bob Goldman. And there were 2 groups of nuns, and one was eating really predominantly a plant-based, whole food, nutritious diet their entire life. And then there was another group that group in particular had, you know, almost perfect brain function and never developed Alzheimer's or dementia. But there was another group that was eating meats and cheeses and eggs and other kinds of dairy products, and they had really higher levels of Alzheimer's and dementia, statistically speaking, by contrast to the rest of the population of nuns that they were looking at there. So the only difference that they found was that because they were living in essentially the same situation, it was just based on their diet. There was another study looking at Trappist monks and Benedictine monks. They got really kind of the same results. Also, Dr. Alois Alzheimer's, for whom the disease is named, stated that Alzheimer's condition was found predominantly in individuals who ate lots of animal products. And in particular, they had high LDL. This is, you know, your lousy kind of cholesterol here, the low density lipoprotein cholesterol that was clogging the arteries and notably also the arteries leading up to the brain, reducing circulation in the small capillaries and really having a negative effect. Then Dr. Ben Johnson, he was talking about how diet was the #1 factor relevant to your health and notably about brain health. So he believes that sugar and sugar spikes are really a huge causal factor associated with Alzheimer's, as well as diseases like diabetes and cancer. So I want to challenge each and every one of you to, just like we do with our patients, to go to a local pharmacy. This is an essential business, so you can still go out to a local pharmacy or shop online, wherever, it doesn't really matter to me, and get a sugar, blood glucose sugar meter. And I want you to check your blood glucose and get a baseline level. And then I want you to eat a bowl of whatever, you know, eat a bowl of quinoa or corn or potatoes or fruits or whatever. And then I want you to wait 20 minutes and I want you to check your blood sugar again. You are going to be surprised. So if your blood sugar went up by 20 points or more, then you really can't be eating that food. It's causing a sugar spike, and that sugar spike is going to cause damage to the brain every time you eat that food. And so it's also causing challenges to your pancreas and all of the little blood vessels and the capillaries and the nerve endings in these sugar feeding cancer cells also. So this is really the issue that is happening with what's called as type 3 diabetes. And this is really diabetes of the brain. And so this type 3 diabetes, I encourage each of you to go and look it up for greater description of this. This is really a glycosylation of the brain. So let me give you an example. I grew up in Maine. And so Maine, there's lots of people that tap the trees for maple syrup. So you go out and you tap the tree, and then you hang a bucket, and then you come back weeks later and you come and pick up this syrup. Well, that syrup moves especially slowly, hence we need to wait weeks. Well, that's the same thing that's happening to your brain when there's too much sugar in your bloodstream. So it's been shown time and time again that the Mediterranean diet, which is rich in fish and whole grains and green leafy vegetables and olives and nuts and all these things that help your brain and help to reduce Alzheimer's disease. Cook and eat fresh foods and savor the taste. Enjoy it with family and friends. This Mediterranean regime is really more than just a diet. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of living. So I want to encourage you to keep doing those kinds of things. So limiting red meats, and don't forget that fish, and especially cold water, really fish that are high in omega-3s. This is the, we have omega-3, 6, and 9, so the predominant ones. And essentially the higher the omega number, the more inflammatory it is, loosely speaking. And so we want omega-3s, which are really help to hinder inflammation is in your diet. Well, if fish isn't something that's cool for you, well, check out maybe walnuts or flax seeds or soybeans. These also have omega-3s in them. Fill up your plate with fruits and vegetables. Enjoy some dark chocolate. This has got flavonoids, and this is a really strong antioxidant. It can help blood flow and reduce inflammation. Spice up your life. Things like turmeric and cinnamon and ginger. These are packed with antioxidants, and they can help to decrease harmful inflammation that may get into your brain as well as everywhere. Have a cup of joe or a cup of tea. Steep it and let all those flavors and fragrances come out, and they may potentially decrease your risk for dementia. Toast to good health. Drink red wine in moderation. Resveratrol, which is found in red wine, and it's really in the skin of these red grapes, is a really potent antioxidant. Well, if you're not a wine drinker, that's fine. Drink red grape juice. Eat plenty of whole grains, things like oats and barley and quinoa, and they're full of B vitamins that reduce inflammation of the brain and potentially preserve your memory. Eat eggs in moderation. These are full of things like vitamin B and D and E, and they're really helpful. You can also eat the yolk. It's okay. And there's potential benefits of supplementation as well. So combining some supplements like vitamin C, which is super helpful right now, especially folks with coronavirus. This is one of the few things that can really help you out. And this is not a talk on coronavirus, but that is one of the few things. So if anyone's interested in that, type down below Corona vitamin C, and we can help you with some protocols specifically around that, okay? It does take a moment for us to explain that to you, but we can talk to you about that. And then tocotrienols, vitamin E, this is super helpful as well, has potential benefits towards your brain. Fish oil supplementation, which is rich in DHEA, and so this is really beneficial as well. And there are alternatives for fish that if you're not a fish lover, so don't worry. All right, so the next thing is mental health. We have to control the risk factors. And so we need to think about things like, what are the medications that you're on that may be decreasing brain function? And you have to manage your blood pressure and your weight and keep that at a healthy level. Take medications that are prescribed, but ideally let's also try to figure out, can we do other things in our life that can reduce the requirement for those? Got to cut down and manage salts and sugars. Got to be active and stay connected and positive in your life. And you got to stay sharp mentally and all the way into your golden years as well. So risk factors like diabetes and obesity, these are things that we need to really manage also. So overweight individuals are more likely to develop diabetes, and this is also a high risk factor for dementia. So if this is something that you're interested in, go and type down below group cleanse. So my assistant Hope is going to be putting on a group cleanse. And so if you're interested in group cleanse, let's say that again, group cleanse. Okay, I got that the last time there. type that down below and we can reach out to you and we can talk to you about a group cleanse that we're going to be doing, okay? There are other risk factors that we need to consider how we're going to be able to reduce as well. So the white menace, we got to eliminate things like white sugar and white flour and white salt and white hydrogenated fats. We got to eat more fiber and get sufficient amount of protein with every meal of the day. We got to control portion sizes as well. And we got to get some exercise in. What about hydration? Well, you know, hydration helps with blood pressure also. And this helps to mitigate inflammation in the brain when we're fully hydrated. So I'm going to take a sip of water because I need to stay hydrated too. So, okay, next one we're going to talk about is sleep and relaxation. So a good night's sleep. Everyone really needs to get good, unadulterated sleep. And so we're going to allow the Sandman to come in. And then when that occurs, actually, that's when we were talking about earlier, those glial cells that come in and help to clean up the cobwebs in the brain. So it's kind of like when you go to work during the day and then there's like a whirlwind of stuff going on, and there's dust that gets turned up everywhere. And then when you leave, the cleaners come in and they clean up and they rearrange things and they organize stuff and they get you ready so that you can go to battle another day. Well, this happens when you go to sleep. And so we got to do this every day. And so on average, we need somewhere around 7 to 8 hours of sleep. We need to fight depression. So Americans are no stranger to depression. And while this whole craziness is going on where everyone's under isolation, this is really challenging. We need to talk about this. Nearly 17 million of us are affected every year by depression. And so, you know, prevalence doesn't make it any easier for us to go through it and even to understand it. And this affects what's called as the limbic system. And this is really kind of right in the center of the brain here. And this is deep within there. And this is associated with our emotions and our memories and arousal. And if there's any alterations to that, we can lead to depression, negativity, and low libido. So we need to really manage that. And we can do that through how we allow ourselves to think, to the degree that we can control that. The nutrients that we feed our brain and the activities we do to be able to help to facilitate those interconnections within our brain as well. Okay, so we need to find happiness so we can control factors around things like our social circle. Who are we spending time with is really instrumental, especially when we're in tough times like this. And so this can lead to a day-to-day level of happiness in our lives. We got to stay positive. This is super duper critical, guys. I can't emphasize this enough. We have to have resilience and our ability to bounce back from really difficult situations. And, you know, we can predict that there's always going to be some kind of stressors in our lives, but we have to have the resilience to be able to respond adequately to the stressors and not overreact to those stressors. We need to face these daily upsets and not make them, you know, a mountain out of a molehill. And we need to be able to boost our own esteem and be less afraid of changes and encourage us to be able to take risks and to fail and to get back up and to do these things again. So I want to encourage each of you, you know, as we're holed up in our homes, me as well, consider going on to Yale. Maybe you've seen this article. There is a popular, really super popular happiness course. I am going to put this into the chat box here. So bear with me, folks. Give me just a minute to expand this. I'm going to go into the chat box, and I am going to put this in here. You can go look for the Corsia taught Yale course there, okay? So I want to encourage each of you to, there we go. Go and check out this course. Potentially that will be interesting for you and maybe something that's valuable to add some additional happiness into your lives, okay? All right, so managing stress. So as we mentioned earlier, we're always gonna have stress. The question is not really whether you have stress, but rather, are you riding the wave or is it beating you up? And so we need to have strategies to be able to manage this. Of course, we know that meditation is really a good thing to do, as well as breathing patterns. Research shows that this can really help us to have a happier brain for years and years to come. So managing stress can also be achieved through building our reservoirs through what's called as the parasympathetic portion of our brain. All right, so let's talk about this here. So we have what's called as the autonomic nerve system, and this is things that occur autonomically without us thinking about it, automatic. And there's sort of two camps of this. There's one camp which is the sympathetic. This is the running from the bear, the fight or flight phase of the brain. And then we have the parasympathetic, the rest and digest and relax and repair phase of the brain. Ideally speaking, we should be spending about 80% of the time here in the parasympathetic rest, digest, repair, and relax part of the brain. And 20% of the time, when we have a loud sound or something jolting, we should be able to get to this sympathetic fight or flight part of the brain. But many of us have an imbalance, and we spend a lot of time over here because we're under so much stress. And so we need to find ways to be able to get back here and to really be spending the majority of our time here. And one of the ways to be able to do this is through what's called as vagal nerve training or vagal tone training. So type in the chat box below if any of you are interested in vagus nerve or vagal nerve training or vagal tone training. Type into the box below vagus, not V-A-G-E-S, but V-A-G-U-S, us talking about vagal nerve training. So type that in below, and we can reach out to you talking about that. So there are a variety of de-stress techniques that I want to talk about ever so briefly, because we need to keep going through this here. And guys, I really appreciate your attention, staying with me. I know there's a lot of content here, but I'm really trying to help you guys out with some stuff that maybe can help affect your life in a positive way, but also to affect all the people around you. It's like ripples, you know, that one droplet. We never know how far those ripples can go. And so I want to encourage each of you to take some things away from the talk tonight and share it with a loved one, share it with a friend, share it with a colleague, and consider how this might be able to benefit their lives as well. Okay, so de-stress techniques here. Got to practice saying no, N-O, no. So to some requests, you know, that maybe you're just beyond your capacity right at the moment. You got to do it politely, but figuring that out. Focus on the present, the now. Don't worry about all the things that may happen in the future or that have happened in the past. Try and take some time to really ground yourself currently, right now, in the present. Now, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't be learning from the past and also strategizing about the future, but we need to also be present in the moment. So my partner, Anna, who gives the other talks each month, she is really terrific in doing this. And I want to put in a plug for you guys to reach out to Anna Clint at Flourish. And she is so magnificent in giving people strategies about being present and being centered and learning how to really connect with your inner self. So if anyone's interested in that, I want to have you put down below Anna. Type Anna, and Anna is going to be able to help you with that. We're going to get you connected with her, Anna Clint with Flourish. All right, so keep a list of the things that bother you and schedule 5 minutes a day to review those and think about those and create some strategies. But then you need to put that aside and you need to start working on some other stuff, okay? So I want to encourage you to be able to do that. And then give your brain a 10-minute break. Every once in a while in the day, just say, hey guys, we're gonna put this down. I need a mental break. I need to go for a walk. I need to get some sunshine. I'm gonna be able to, you know, really just let it just go for a minute. Think about some other stuff. Not think critically is really important. Using imagery, consider placing a photo of your favorite spot in your life, wherever it is, and putting it in front of you. And this is really going to encourage you. Every time you see it, there's a limbic response. That's that emotional part of the brain, the limbic system. And that's going to allow you to just kind of calm and get at ease and feel comfortable. And so whenever you're stressed, just take a moment and look at that image, and you'll be amazed at how it helps you. And you can think about how does it make you feel and what does it look like in your mind's eye beyond what you see even in the image. What are the sounds you have associated with that location? What are the smells, the olfactory system? The more sensory components you can connect there, the more you're going to calm things down. Thinking positively. So when you find yourself in a stressful situation, tell yourself, I can do this. I can find and figure a way out of this. I'm going to be okay. It may be that, we need to work hard at it. That's okay. Not everything comes right at that moment, but we are going to be okay. Allow events to unfold naturally. This mindset really helps you to reduce the anxiety associated with things that come with high expectations and sometimes unrealistic expectations. So we need to really allow for these things to just kind of unravel and allow ourselves to ponder that. And the universe is probably actually giving you some opportunities in those moments, okay? Focus on the specific problem at hand and protect yourself from making it into a bigger issue than it actually is. So during these heightened periods of stress, we find that some of the supplements that are really valuable are L-theanine, as well as St. John's wort, 5-HTP, and valerian. All of these are really powerful things when people are under a lot of stress to be able to help to manage those better. As I mentioned earlier, you have to not only create the environment in the situation to be able to manage those stressors and to provide the best ability for your brain to be able to be biohacked, to be as best as possible and to boost your brain's capacity, but then we need to nourish it as well. And so sometimes that's with the foods that we consume, but we know that often the foods don't really have the same spectrum of nutrients that it used to have, or all of the nutrients that are necessary. And especially while we're under lockdown, maybe your diet's really changed and we're not getting all the same nutrients that we're accustomed to. So sometimes supplements can supplement your diet and allow you to get and bridge that gap and to create an opportunity for you to be able to get from here to there. So if anyone's interested in supplementation, we work with a variety of dispensers. I know that many people have been talking about how it's so challenging to be able to get a hold of supplements, and many folks are running out of them. We were just in touch with our dispensary today that works with literally hundreds of different manufacturers. And we have, I went and looked onto some of the protocols that we utilize, and I found that I had to replace a few of them with, this product or that product from this dispenser or manufacturer or another manufacturer, but I was able to get everything. So if anyone's interested in supplementation, we can help you with discounting and setting up an account. We can help you putting those in there, or you can do it on your own, and we can even still facilitate the discounting. So type in supplements down below if that's interesting to you. If not, not to worry. Maybe you've already got that set up. Not to worry. So what about brain and mental fitness? So this is the next thing we need to work on. So we need to build a brain reserve. This brain reserve, what am I talking about? Well, this is your brain's ability to be able to adapt and respond to changes and resist damage. We've partly talked about this before, but this is something that really starts in childhood, and it gets stronger as we become and evolve to become adults. And so people who continue to learn and embrace new activities in their life and develop new skills and interests, these are the building blocks that improve your ability of your brain's reserve as we're talking about it. So babies' brains have unmyelinated nerves, and their early experiences shape their permanent connections. So these unmyelinated means that the nerve, which is like a wire, essentially, are unmyelinated. And the myelin actually, it's like taking Amtrak and turning it into a bullet train. It facilitates the speed, and also it removes any of the outside chatter that may be occurring. So much like our wires, historically they had cloth around them to protect them. Well, today we use things like certain kinds of plastics to be able to do that as well. Well, the myelin does similar kinds of things. And so when we start to develop that myelin, it facilitates not only stronger connections, but then also it embeds them so that we can always access those connections wherever they are in the brain. In our late teens and 20s, the myelin continues to deposit, especially in these prefrontal cortex. This is the front part of the brain here. And this is associated in particular with like volitional activities or executive activities of the brain. And then the judgment centers peak at around 25 years of age. And so this is one of the reasons why we really shouldn't be drinking before the age of 20 or 25, because we may diminish the capacity for these nerves to get the myelin sheaths and to really facilitate the connections, especially with the prefrontal areas and the judgment areas of the brain. So we have to keep stimulating these neurons for them to become efficient. And sometimes people lose cognitive flexibility. And so that's the pliability of your brain. And oftentimes this is associated with low serotonin. And so serotonin is generated actually in your gut predominantly, and they get caught up in the thought, like thought patterns and loops in your brain. And so we start to what's called as perseverate. And so we start thinking one thing, and it's like the record keeps spinning again and then again, and there's a scratch. And so it keeps looping back and looping back and looping back. So this is called perseveration. And so sometimes things like supplements like 5-HTP and St. John's wort, and inositol can help with helping to regulate that and allowing for better flexibility and pliability in the brain. So you got to study as well. You got to get educated. You got to go out and find some things to do to ward off mental decline. Go take an online class. There's something called Khan Academy, Khan, Khan Academy. Maybe many of you have already heard about Khan Academy, but there are literally thousands of online courses that are free of charge that you can find online right now, today. Go to Online Academy. So I encourage you to do this. Do things like crossword puzzles and play chess and card games and online games. This is like mental gymnastics, and they can really help your brain from the degeneration that can occur. So learn new hobbies or skills, learn a new language, learn a new instrument, pick up photography, or learning art, and even just looking at art can be super powerful. It actually stimulates so many areas of the brain, just like music can. Music actually stimulates more areas of the brain than almost any other activity. It is amazing. When they put these scans onto a brain, everything just starts lighting up, and it's like going wild, or all these connections start to occur. And so this can help to really facilitate the recall of your memory and learning. And so when people are in school and they listen to music, it actually protects the hippocampus of the brain, and it integrates that whole brain, especially into what's called as the temporal lobes. These are the side lobes over here. The left side hears changes in frequency and intensity, more so with musicians than with novices. So this is actually thought to be more of like a learned experience, and it develops and enhances with musicians, by contrast of people like me that is a novice associated with music, although I love music. And then the right side puts music together, and it kind of collates all the different pieces of music. And then the limbic system, this is where we get emotional experiences associated with music. And so we start to have different kinds of thoughts or feelings or emotions associated with different kinds of music. And so one of the reasons why things like Mozart is super powerful and positive, and heavy metal tends to be sort of the opposite of that. Now, that may not be true for everyone, but it's thought to be that. So this limbic system, when we start to get these positive emotional experiences, it increases the prefrontal cortex activity, and then concentration, our ability to be able to stay focused on things, really enhances and improves. So that's why when we're learning, we should be listening to these kinds of music as well. And it can create actually the right temporal lobe can facilitate religious and spiritual experiences as well. That's super powerful. And so when we're faced with a difficult time, I want to encourage you to go out and listen to music and learn an instrument. And this is going to increase your test scoring capacity when you're doing those online courses or you're working with us, etc. It also increases, interestingly enough, visual spatial reasoning. So our ability to be able to recognize kind of where things are in relation to each other is enhanced when we're listening to music. And this is so powerful. Musicians often are also emotionally healthier and just better test takers as well, which is super powerful. Okay, moving on, guys. Social interaction. I know it is so challenging in these times to be able to stay socially connected, especially when we need to maintain social distance. And so this is proving to be really challenging for people. I'm getting calls repeatedly. I was just talking to my folks, and they live in a retirement community, and they're really finding it to be very challenging because many of their social outlets are diminished as of late. But this is true for everyone, not just older individuals. And we need to be able to pivot and start to use the phone and video conferencing just like we are now to be able to see and recognize each other. So we are pivoting in our office, and we're starting to do more telemedicine. So if anyone's wanting to participate in telemedicine and is looking for a new practitioner, I encourage you to write telemedicine down below, and we can connect with you and encourage and start that process. So rich social networks prove to be really helpful to create support and reduce stress and combat depression, enhance intellectual stimulus. These are all really important things. In addition to things like happy marriages and long-term relationships, they really are have proven to help people to age more gracefully and without the cognitive diminishments. Okay, so treasure your loved ones, reach out to them. I want to really encourage everyone right now, this minute, to pause for just a moment. I want you to think about a single friend, just one person that you've been meaning to call. You just have not been able to get around to reaching out to. I want you to write down that name. And I want you to now make a plan to, as soon as we finish up, or to put it on your calendar for tomorrow morning, to actually call that person, schedule the time, make sure it happens. First thing in the morning, before all the things that are going to happen in our days, I want you to reach out to that person and maintain that social connection. Got to be able to branch out, do things that are interesting. Don't forget pets. Pets are amazing. And so, these create loving relationships that are super powerful and important for our brains. They really help people to be able to feel loved and important. And then we talked about environment. So this is the last one here. So we think about psychosomatic. This is where your body and physical issues are affecting your mental health. But then there's also somatic psychic phenomena as well. And so this is really where the mental symptoms are affecting your body. So they're sort of the reverse, all above the root cause. Oh my gosh, so that's really amazing. So we've got to be able to manage our gut flora and our microbiome. And so if we have any kinds of deficiencies in things like vitamin D, when we're not getting enough sunlight going outside, like right now, or it's winter, in vitamin B deficiencies, B12 notably, well, we can't really have proper brain function if we have these deficiencies. And so we're going to end up with depression and hopelessness and helplessness and sadness and these kinds of things. So we need to consider how we're going to be able to get those into our bodies, and whether that's through the foods we consume or going outside or utilizing supplementation, we need to figure that out. And so we can help you on that process. So I remember working with a child who had autism, and the parents were saying they were so desperate. And I want to share this story because it's really important. And their child was, I think, about 5 years old, and he was not talking. And that's really concerning at 5 years of age. And so, they had just started to consider what else they could do. And so we started working with them on diet in particular. We'd gotten the child off of gluten, off of casein, and a few days later, all of a sudden, this child started speaking in literally full sentences, and they reported back to us, and this was the most amazing thing. And, and the physicians that they were working with, the other doctors, were really quite skeptical of this. But the only factor that had changed was looking at their diet. And so I want to just encourage you to consider that there really are sometimes really magnificent changes that can take place with these kinds of situations. So we need to be able to consider these environmental stressors, things like leaky gut, intestinal permeability, mental mind and emotional stressors, and genetics. All of these can play a role. And so we need to look at these. All right, so we've talked about a lot of stuff, guys. There is so much more to go through, but I want to, really make sure that you are clear on the fact that, sometimes we need to use supplementation, things like DHEA and EPA. These are the omega-3s that I was talking about earlier, things like vitamin C, the tocotrienols, vitamin E, or even ALA can be helpful. We have rat studies as well as other human studies where they fed blueberries and the learned motor skills became faster, and they actually had less severe strokes in these individuals as well. We need protein in our diets to be able to enhance dendritic cells, especially in babies. They need to have good amounts of protein. And 6 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables on a daily basis, not just on Thursdays and on Sundays, but literally every day we need 6 to 9 servings. So if you're not doing that, maybe we need to help you out and consider how we're going to be able to assist you on that journey. So as I mentioned, there were some offers that we're going to be able to help you guys with. We've covered a lot of material. There's so much more to go into. I know I talk fast. I hope that you guys have kept up speed. But there are some, some things that I want to make sure to be able to offer to you all. So one of the tests that we've been offering this month that I want to be able to extend this offer to you all, it's called BrainSpan. And this is an amazing test that's being utilized in the military and in the government and a variety of other locations. In this one singular test, we actually do a simple finger prick, and then you're going to go on and do a computerized test, and we're going to correlate these things together and figure out exactly how your brain is functioning and in different areas of the brain, and that gives us clues of how we can help you out. So if you guys are interested in this kind of a test, type in below BrainSpan, type down below BrainSpan, and we can reach out to you and help you to get that test. We can send you out the kit, and then we can talk you through the results of that as well. So I know that there's probably a ton of questions, so let me get over there. Hold on a second. Let me expand this out. I want to take some of these questions that you guys might have. Hopefully you've been writing some of these in there. All right. So type in your questions if you have some questions. I want to make sure to help you guys with those. Yeah, I know. My assistant Hope is saying, you got to get to the Q&A. Oh, geez. All right. Sorry. Sorry for being a little late. Okay, so you want to hear more about the brain test, the BrainSpan. Yeah, so I encourage you can go online and check out BrainSpan on our website. There are some functional medicine lab tests. There's a tab for that. It gives a little bit more explanation to that. We're going to mail out you this kit, as I was mentioning, and then this is going to look at essentially not only the omega panel as it relates to, as we were talking about earlier, omega-3, 6, and 9s, and how the ratio of those are in that, how that relates to your brain function and capacity and inflammation. But then the computerized test is going to give us really clues about how your brain correlates those things and how it's affecting your brain. So then we're going to get really good insight that's personalized and directed towards you of where we can target enhancing that and what kinds of things we can do. So that's going to be one of the best and easiest ways to get started with us, to be able to assist you in this journey to figure out where is your brain today and what can we do to help you out with that. If you're interested in that, just write down there BrainSpan, and we can connect with you and help you out with that going forward, okay? I know some folks had mentioned to me earlier they were interested in learning about vagus nerve, VAGUS, and this is the most prominent nerve associated with what's called as the parasympathetic nerve system. So as I mentioned earlier, our autonomic nerve system has these sort of two camps, and one camp is what's called as the parasympathetic, and this is the rest and digest and repair phase of the brain and the autonomic nerve system. And the vagus nerve, VAGUS, is the nerve that really is one of the most prominent nerves associated with that. And VAGUS, vagus, is actually meaning the wanderer, and it wanders all the way down past many of the different areas within our larynx and pharynx, and it facilitates phonation as well as our thyroid, and it is connected into our lungs and our heart. In addition, it goes and passes down past a number of our organs, and then all the way down into the gut. And this is what really creates and facilitates this two-way communication pattern between our gut and our brain. So essentially, you can think of it this way. Our brain controls our gut controls our immune system, and our immune system affects and controls our brain. It's like a big loop, and it goes forwards and backwards, and it can connect either way, but I'm just, at some point I have to say this in one fashion. So brain to gut, gut to immune system back up to the brain, and they can all be connected. Well, the vagus nerve is what connects our brain and our gut, is one of the major connections there. So if we're having any kind of inflammation in our gut, we can start to have altered signaling and inflammation that may be affecting our brain as well. All right, cool. So any other questions that I can help address you all here? Anyone else, please type in your questions below. And if we don't get to your questions tonight, by all means, I want to encourage each of you to take those questions and go to our Facebook page, and you can type them in there. We'll make sure to respond to them there as well, because I know we've been going on for roughly about an hour and a half, and I know this is really long, so I appreciate you guys staying on board with me today. But again, if you're interested in those other talks that I've mentioned, we will be reaching out to you, as well as if you're interested in brain span or doing the group cleanse. If you would type that in, we'll make sure to reach out to you as well. Guys, I want to make one last plug for you all. Please, everyone, take care. This is really a challenging time. I know it is super hard for many folks. We did write up a really long, I understand that, a really long document that is found on our homepage, optimizedwellnesscenter.com. And it gives a lot of detailed information about coronavirus. So if you or anyone is being affected by that, want some insights, some other information there, I encourage you to go to our website, optimizedwellnesscenter.com, and you can download that document directly from the homepage. No questions asked there. Please, everyone, be safe, and then come and join us again in our upcoming talks. I'm really grateful that you joined us today. Thank you so much for being out here, and everyone, have a wonderful and blessed evening, and we'll look forward to connecting with you all soon again, okay? Thanks, everyone, for joining us. So glad that you joined us today, and I encourage you to welcome other individuals to join us. Go on to our social media sites and write a little note. We'd really appreciate that. Bye, guys. Thanks for coming out.